Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. We have a great guest, General Jack Keane. How are you, sir?
Good to see you, Mark.
I've watched you for a few years now, and you're exceptional, which is why I wanted to have you on this program. You know, we get caught up in a lot of the domestic politics, the wall, the government shut. That's all very important. But so is foreign policy, so is national security, so is military policy. And I wanted to have you here to focus in on a few subjects. First of all, I want the public to know a little bit more about you. You're a graduate of the Army War College and the Command and General Staff College. You're a four-star general. There are not a lot of four-star generals. You're the second one I've met in my entire life. You completed over 37 years of public service in December 2003, culminating in your appointment as Acting Chief of Staff and Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army. You have a career as a infantry paratrooper, a combat veteran of Vietnam, decorated for valor. You spent much of your military life in operational commands, where you had trips in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you advised senior defense officials with multiple visits during the surge period, and you provided assistance directly to General David Petraeus. And in December of 2018, you received the Ronald Reagan Peace Through Strength Award at the Reagan Library, the first military official to ever receive that award. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that was quite a humbling experience. You know, you get a number of awards when you're in a position like me, and you're certainly grateful for all of those, but that award really got to me, to be frank. I mean, I have tremendous regard for Ronald Reagan and what he stood for and what his legacy is, and I was honored.
Are you impressed with the foreign policy of the current president, President Trump?
Generally speaking, yes. I do have some difficulties with certain aspects of it, but I think what the administration truly got right is they set the strategic framework for how the world truly is. And that was expressed in the national security strategy that they published in their first year in office, which even then was unprecedented. And they set a strategic framework that laid out in the world that we are really in an era of big power competition, namely with Russia and China, who want to destroy the international order that has existed for 70-plus years, principally designed to prevent major conflict like a World War III again. And I think those institutions have served us well. They want to depart from them because of their own national interests. And also the regional hegemony of Iran and their malign and aggressive behavior and what they have done in the Middle East and also globally in terms of state-sponsored terrorism. North Korea, a rogue state with nuclear weapons threatening the use of them, certainly when that strategy was crafted. Now at least we're talking to each other. And, of course, radical Islam. Middle East is a breeding ground for it, but the truth is it's on just about every continent, and it's thriving and it's growing. So that strategy that they identified, I think they got about right. It was a major departure from, I think, the pretend strategy that we had under the Obama administration, where we did not want to step up and identify these challenges in the world. I think, I'm only speculating now, largely because they didn't want to have to deal with them and be held accountable for a strategy to cope with these realities.
Isn't non-involvement or non-engagement or a pretend strategy, isn't that provocative? I mean, our enemies see it, and they say, okay, Obama or whomever, they're saying this, but they don't really mean it. And then you have the invasion of Crimea. And then you have the beginning of these phony islands in the South China Sea. And then you have Russia moving into Syria and so forth and so on. I want to break each one of these down. Let's start with China. I'm just a pedestrian. But I see China as a major, major threat because of all the focus and resources they're putting into their military, and not just, troops. Their strategic decisions, their space warfare activity that they're really leading on, stealing our technology, which they not only use for civilian purposes but military purposes, constantly claiming more and more navigable waters that belong to the Philippines or belong to Japan. And do you see China as the grave threat that I do?
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed, so does the administration. The National Defense Strategy identified China as the #1 strategic long-term threat to the American people and the security of the United States. I spent a year-long effort on a commission looking at the national defense strategy and also how it's being implemented. So I'm intimately familiar with what our challenges are here. First of all, many people in the United States, after Deng Xiaoping started to conduct economic reform and open up China's marketplace and move towards capitalism, fell in on China. Our business leaders fell in on them, strategists, analysts.
Like 25 years ago or so.
Yeah, 2+ decades, absolutely right. And the thought is that if we help China along in terms of developing them economically, that political reform will follow. Well, we lost that bet because that hasn't happened. China has doubled down on authoritarianism. They are fundamentally run by a very closed Chinese Communist Party. When you think of China, you just shouldn't think of all the wonderful things that's inside the culture of that country. You've got to think about who runs it. Chinese communists run it. And they run it with absolute iron hand and control of the people. What they're about is now in writing and in public discourse. It used to be in the closet, so to speak, until President Xi came along. And he has set some serious, formidable goals for them. One, to dominate and control the Pacific, the Asia-Pacific region at the expense of the United States, and to try to drive us out of there and cut off the relationship that we have with our allies. Two, is to replace the United States in the late 2030s, early 2040s, replace the United States as the world's global leader. And they are about doing this, and they have a couple of pillars to accomplish it. One is they're economic predators, and they used that engine of investment in emerging countries to pull them to them with some pretty tough behavior, which they put money into these countries, the countries default on loans, they take over the infrastructure projects that they were promising, they don't deliver a quality product. As a matter of fact, they only use Chinese labor when they're doing it, and they insist on Huawei, their service system, to be the main driver in that country, and their telecom units as well, which means they're taking over the personal intelligence of the people in that country for generations to come. They're opening up seaports because they want to be a global power like the United States, so they have a Navy base in Djibouti. They have another one that they're developing in Pakistan, and they are taking over many of the ports that are in the key choke points around the world in terms of operating those ports.
Who runs the Panama Canal?
China.
China runs the Panama Canal.
They help operate it. Mm-hmm. They
have a foothold there, effectively.
They have a foothold there, and for why? For obvious reasons. It's of strategic influence in the world today, and it helps to control commerce. They're South China Sea. They've militarized the South China Sea, which they told President Obama they really weren't doing, but everybody knew they were doing it, to include our intelligence services that were working for President Obama. They militarized the South China Sea because half of the world's economy passes through the South China Sea. And in a time of conflict or unrest, they want to have control. 62% of their oil comes out of the Middle East. They know that the United States carrier battle group could tie that up in terms of confrontation, and it's the Achilles heel right now of China. That is why the port exists in Djibouti. That is why they're building another one in Pakistan near the Indian Ocean. They want to have economic influence initially that will give them geopolitical influence and ultimately control.
What you're suggesting here is they are preparing for, not necessarily ready to launch, preparing for an offensive war against the United States. Why else would they be doing all this?
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm going to disagree with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, they saw Desert Storm, 1991, the prowess of the United States. Before that, we had been involved in Vietnam, protracted war, and on low technology. We recovered from that largely due to the Reagan administration, which got us on a proper footing with the Soviet Union and upscaled all of our military capabilities. The American people didn't really know how good we got until they saw that. Well, guess what? So did Russia, and so did China see that, and it spooked both of them. As a result of that, and then the Iraq invasion in 2003 was another data point for them. They made this conclusion. One, we don't want to fight a war with the United States, a conventional war, a high-end war, because of the capabilities they have. Two, what we need to do is get those capabilities ourselves to a certain degree, and in certain cases, have special capabilities that the United States doesn't have. So in the event we have to fight that war, that we're not going to be disadvantaged. But here's the key thing that they've done. China wants to avoid conflict with the United States, so they have developed what I'm calling gray zone operations to conduct operations below the level of conflict that will get them the same results that conflict would get, which is what? Geopolitical control and influence. So South China Sea, East China Sea, areas around Japan and Taiwan are all about intimidation, coercion, undermining civil society, undermining governments, taking over media operations that have the spin that they want as far south as Australia. This is a major campaign. They have 130,000 commercial fishing boats that work for the PLA. It's the People's Liberation Army, all militarized with proper GPS and also radio communications to do what? To intimidate and coerce other fishing rights that countries have in the regions. Day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, they're wearing down these countries in terms of their own sovereignty. They violate their air and maritime rights on a regular basis. And they're trying to demonstrate to those allies, to those countries who are mostly all allies of the United States, that, look, the United States can't help you here. You want to be successful in this region and have some degree of sovereignty, you're going to have to work with us.
When we come back, I want to ask you about the Chinese and what they're doing in space. And it appears India has awakened to what China's doing, too, when we return. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, most weeknights you can watch Levin TV. Levin TV. Just go to blazetv.com/mark to sign up, blazetv.com/mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you. We'll be right back.